I now recognize Mr. Tim Riley, the Sandra L. and Monroe E. Trout Director and Chief Curator of America's National Churchill Museum. Mr. Riley, you have 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, members of the committee, I'm pleased to be with you today along with my colleagues, Westminster College President Don Lofi and the college's board chair, Jim Morton, to express our strong support for this bill. This legislation rightly recognizes the national significance of America's National Churchill Museum at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, the site of Winston Churchill's world-changing 1946 address, The Sinews of Peace, commonly known today as the Iron Curtain speech. Churchill's most famous post-war address was a clarion call to Western democracies, imploring them to work together to create a secure and peaceful world. Churchill's speech was also a stern warning that an Iron Curtain had descended across the continent of Europe, creating an ideological divide between communism and Western democracy. Historians, including Churchill himself, agree that the Cold War era began with that powerful speech at Westminster College. It was in America's heartland, almost 80 years ago, in the rural capital of Callaway County, Missouri, where Churchill, with President Truman at his side, delivered a speech and changed the world. So great was the power of Churchill's prose that 15 years after the speech, college officials desired to establish a memorial to Churchill, his speech, and legacy. It will not be surprising to this august body that the college did what it thought necessary to mark the moment. It formed a committee. And so it happened. One committee member suggested putting up a statue. Another suggested a Sinews of Peace memorial garden as the usual, if not pedestrian, tributes. These were dismissed. Instead, college president Robert Davidson had a bold alternative idea: to relocate from London to Fulton, the war-scarred Christopher Wren Church of St. Mary Aldermanbury, and rebuild it on our campus to honor Churchill's speech. The venerable building first appeared in British records in the 1100s. It stood proudly in London for 500 years. William Shakespeare lived a block away. The original Aldermanbury was destroyed during the Great Fire of London in 1666, before King Charles II asked Sir Christopher Wren to rebuild it along with 50 other churches, including the famed St. Paul's Cathedral. More recently, but no less tragically, during the Second World War, on December 29, 1940, German warplanes dropped 20,000 incendiary bombs on London. In one of the worst raids of the Blitz, the Second Great Fire began. At the time, Churchill commanded at all costs, save St. Paul's. Firefighters bravely battled the blazes. The next morning, as the smoke rose above the city, the iconic dome of St. Paul's was saved. Aldermanbury suffered a different fate. The ruins of the church stood in London for 2 decades until Westminster College, with private support from Americans across the nation, raised funds to dismantle the ruins, 7,000 stones, and transport them 4,000 miles to the middle of Missouri, where they were reassembled as the Churchill Memorial. Ladies and gentlemen, the building we speak about today has been a landmark in some form or fashion on our shores or across the Atlantic for almost 900 years. Today, we ask that it formally be designated a United States national landmark. Churchill was immensely proud of his American heritage and often reminded audiences, including Congress, that his mother was American and his ancestors fought with Washington's army. Congress passed a resolution authorizing President Kennedy to confer upon Sir Winston our nation's first honorary citizenship in 1962. In 1963, Churchill, at age 88, endorsed the project at Fulton, calling it an imaginative concept, adding it would be a symbol for the hope of peace and the future of mankind. And so it is. Built by the British, bombed by the Germans, and rebuilt by Americans in Missouri, St. Mary Aldermanbury stands today as a beacon of resilience. It is a symbol of steadfastness in the face of adversity, a Churchillian trait and an American one, to be sure. Since 2020, Westminster College has invested $6 million in the preservation of the museum. Ladies and gentlemen, we are committed to preserving our rich history so that new generations can learn from it. I think it appropriate to let Churchill have the final word today. These words from 1943 seem fitting. He said, "We shape our buildings, and afterwards our buildings shape us." In America's National Churchill Museum at Westminster College, we have a landmark that continues to shape us in a most meaningful manner. Thank you.
It certainly was a treat of his to have the final word. Thank you, Mr. Riley.